Good morning, guys. Good morning, Damaris, Liz, Omar, Vanessa. We'll get started here in just 1 second. If you haven't already, please take a look at the feedback that I provided in your skeleton outline essay that you completed yesterday. Take a look at my comments. We'll talk a little bit about what I mean by some of the comments that I left in that assignment. Hello, Caro. Good morning.
Good morning, teacher.
Good morning.
Okay, I want to go ahead and get started. I want to allow enough time to answer questions, specific questions. Really want to focus on the assignment that you guys completed yesterday, the skeleton outline. I went through this morning and left some comments, and I wanted to summarize those comments that I left for the assignment, and I want to revisit again the idea of claims for your topic sentences and your thesis statement. I want to clarify any doubts that you have. So as we talk about this morning, the different claims, like what a claim is, we'll watch a very short video as well that explains what a claim is. I want you to compare what you have and the comments that I left to see what additional changes that you still need to make. We need to begin writing our essay, so whatever form that your skeleton outline is at this moment, go ahead and begin completing the first draft. Remember, the first draft is going to be due this Saturday. Okay, you're going to have all day Saturday. I want to give you all day if you need it to complete it. Then I'll go in on Sunday, start providing you feedback, taking a look at some of your texts. Next week, we'll have opportunities to work together also collaboratively to correct each other's work as we did in Unit 1. We'll do that again next week. But our goal now is to complete our first draft and begin writing. So hopefully we've gone through this process of creating a problem statement. We created a thesis statement, a skeleton outline that included not only the thesis statement, but the 3 topic sentences. And we also created a research matrix that was designed to help us think about the different arguments that are going to make up our overall argument. That is, how are we going to include a main argument, an objection, and a reply, and how are we going to present those 3 different types of arguments throughout our argumentative essay. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. I want to show you something here in our virtual classroom. So hopefully you can see my screen. So we're in week 11, and I added here a video, and we've talked about claims before, but I think it's a good time to review again what a claim is, and we'll talk about these points below the video here in a second, but I'm going to go ahead and open this up.
Arguments are made up of claims.
Okay, let me turn this down. Let me know, guys, about the volume. I'm going to start it over again.
Arguments are made up of claims or statements.
Okay, just let me know if you can hear the video coming through the YouTube video, if you can hear the audio, rather.
Yes, we can hear it.
Yes, we can hear it, teacher.
Can you guys hear did you hear the audio from the video?
Yes, teacher.
In this section,
Just want to make sure that you guys can hear it okay.
Yes.
Are you guys able to hear the audio?
Yes, teacher.
Yes, teacher, we can.
Can you guys hear me? Oh, yes. Okay. All right. I see the chat. Okay. Thank you. All right. So let's go back to the screen share. All right. So we'll start the video here from the beginning.
Arguments are made up of claims or statements. In this section, I want to say a few words about what this means and why it's important for logic.
Now he says arguments are made up of claims. So for the purposes of our essay, what we mean by this is the overall argument is made up of individual claims, in our case, topic sentences. Our topic sentences are claims that could even be made up of even more specific claims that are included as evidence in your body paragraphs. So this is what we mean. It's almost like a layered effect where we have the thesis statement is one claim that's general. And the topic sentences are claims that are more specific. And then even evidence and even possibly analysis sentences are even more specific claims that support the topic sentence. So certain specific claims will relate to a broader or more general claim.
Logic. Here's a definition you might see in a logic text. A claim is a sentence that can be true or false, but not both.
A claim is a sentence that can be true or false, but not both. Take a look at your some of your topic sentences, right? And see how true or how false they can be, right? And check to see whether or not your topic sentences are indeed a claim.
Actually, in logic text, the more commonly used term is statement or proposition. These are all intended to mean the same thing. A claim or a statement or a proposition is a bit of language whose defining characteristic is that it makes an assertion that could be true or false, but not both. The true or false part of this definition expresses a principle of classical logic that's called the principle of bivalence.
So think of, again, another way to state this. A claim is a sentence that can be true or false. A claim is a sentence that is debatable. A claim is a sentence that is arguable. That is, if you're going to present a claim, there needs to be a counter to that. There needs to be an opposite. There needs to be the other side of the debate. Okay, for me, it helps me to think of it as a debate. Whatever you state as a claim or a statement or a proposition or a thesis statement or a topic sentence, those are all synonymous. Whenever you present a claim, there needs to be two issues, two sides of the debate in order for it to be a claim. Otherwise, it's not a claim.
This principle is
And not every sentence is a claim, right? So that's why we're being very careful to think about what kind of sentence are we including in our topic sentences. These are our key sentences throughout an essay. A coherent essay requires these key sentences that are, in this case, they're claims.
asserts that a claim can only assume one of two truth values, true or false. There's no third option like half true or half false or almost true. The but not both part of this definition expresses a different principle of classical logic called the principle of non-contradiction. This principle states that a claim can't be both true and false at the same time. It's either one or the other. And to assert otherwise is to assert a contradiction. Interestingly, there are systems of logic where both the principle of bivalence and the principle of non-contradiction are relaxed. And logicians can study different systems of reasoning that don't assume these principles. But in classical logic, they hold, and what follows, we're going to assume that they hold. Now, you might ask why defining claims in this way is important. Here are two reasons. First, not all sentences can function as claims for argumentative purposes.
And this is a key point. Not all sentences can function as claims for an argumentative purpose. Not all sentences can function as topic sentences. That's why I'm being very particular about the types of sentences that you have. All of your sentences are grammatically correct, right? But some sentences are better than others in terms of to the degree that they are claims or not. Okay, so he's going to give some suggestions as to what are and what are not claims. So he mentions here questions are not claims. I think that's one of the obvious ones. We're not going to begin a paragraph with a question. And if you're ever wondering, well, what's wrong with posing a question? at the beginning of a paragraph, this is the reason. It's not a claim, right? It's a question. And so instead of posing the question, we can answer the question. Now, don't get confused with beginning your essay with a question as a hook. That's a different purpose, and that's a whole different thing, right? So it's okay to have a question to begin your introduction paragraph, to begin your essay, because it's functioning as a hook. It's not functioning as a claim, and that's perfectly acceptable. But avoid questions to begin your paragraphs.
For example, questions don't count as claims since they don't assert anything that can be true or false. If your question like, do you like mushrooms on your pizza? That's a request for information. It doesn't assert that such and such is true or false. Another type of sentence that doesn't count as a claim is a command or an imperative, like step away from the car and put your hands behind your head. That's a request to perform an action. It makes no sense to ask whether the action or the command is true or false. So not every bit of language counts as a claim, and so not every bit of language can play the role of a premise or a conclusion of an argument. A second reason why this notion of a claim or statement is important is because it gives us a way of talking about clarity and precision in our use of language. This is because in saying that a sentence can function as a claim in an argument, what we're saying is that all the relevant parties, both the person giving the argument and the intended audience of the argument, have a shared understanding of the meaning of that sentence. And in this context, what it means to understand the meaning of the sentence is to understand what it would mean for the sentence to be true or false. That is, it involves being able to recognize and distinguish in your mind the state of affairs in which the sentence is true from the state of affairs in which the sentence is false.
Okay, so the speaker here is getting into the weeds a little bit, some of the details, but the main point I want you to remember at this point is that you're presenting an argumentative essay, and through building an argument, it requires smaller claims or smaller arguments that include the initial claims, the counterclaims, and the rebuttals. That we're assuming that we're taking sides and moving through the debate to anticipate how someone else might come and disagree with us, right? So when you're presenting something and you're saying cell phones should be used in class, you have to anticipate and think, okay, somebody's going to disagree with me, and what case are they going to build against me so that I can present the strongest case for whatever it is that I'm arguing for. And that's what you are doing essentially when you're thinking about your initial claims, your counterclaims, and your rebuttal. You're anticipating someone disagreeing with you. And here, we're basically, what he's saying is that each of the claims that you state is either going to be true or false, because there's going to be a counterclaim that's going to also state the opposite or explain what's weak about the opposite claim, right? Because you have to be able to assume that each claim is true in and of itself. And that has to be that there's no degrees, like what's kind of correct. You're arguing, yes, it is, and no, it's not. And this is one of the reasons why I'm asking also, for most cases, avoid the modal can. Some of the comments that I left this morning, looking over at some of your topic sentences, I'm suggesting that you avoid, for the most part, the modal can. And why is that? Because that shows uncertainty. It shows something is less probable or less true. And what we want to do is state things that are true. And we can state counter arguments that are also, we feel, are true. And it goes back and forth, but it's not so much degree or in terms of, well, it could happen, this might happen, sometimes this could possibly happen. No, it's this way, here's the counter, it's like this, and then the reply or the rebuttal, this is the answer to the prior claim.
So, in the context of logic and argumentation, for a sentence to be able to function as a claim, or to be able to function as a premise or a conclusion of an argument, There has to be a shared understanding of what the sentence is asserting. So if the sentence is too vague or its meaning is ambiguous, then it can't function as a claim in an argument, because in this case, we literally don't know what we're talking about. So the requirement that a sentence be able to function as a claim is not a trivial one. It's actually pretty demanding. Not all bits of language make assertions, and not all assertions are sufficiently clear in their meaning to function as claims. And this is important. Before you can even begin to ask whether an argument is good or bad, you need to have a shared understanding of what the argument actually is. And this is the requirement that you're expressing when you say that an argument is made up of claims that can be true or false.
Now, one thing I'll add to this about his comment about a claim being too vague or ambiguous is also make sure, in the case of a topic sentence, that it's more specific. There are going to be cases, there are cases that I found where some of you could benefit by writing a topic sentence that's more specific. Remember that your whole explanation in your body paragraph, it's basically one paragraph. And sometimes the tendency is to write a topic sentence that's just too general, right? The idea itself could actually be an essay in and of itself. The topic sentence, which is meant to only apply to one paragraph, could actually be, in its current form, an idea that's represented in a 5 to 10, 15 paragraph essay. And so part of trying to not be too vague or ambiguous is also making sure that we're being specific. So the idea, we'll talk about this here in a second, and we'll see some examples, but is to take the idea from your thesis statement and make it more specific, make it a detail. And how can we make it more specific? Clauses, phrases, adjectives. Relative clauses, those are adjective clauses, adverbial clauses, noun clauses, right? Using good adjectives, thinking about even some of the question words that you could be, that help prompt you to add more information to that one sentence. Now, certainly we don't want to have something that's too specific, and we don't want to have a sentence that's too long. But in most cases, the problem is not that we're too specific. The problem is we're too general. Again, we're talking in terms of the topic sentence that's going to represent the main idea of one body paragraph.
What this means in practice is that ideally, you want everyone to have a shared understanding of what the argument is about and what the premises are asserting. If people can't agree on what the issue is or what's being asserted, then you have to go back and forth and clarify the issue, clarify the arguments so that all parties finally have a shared understanding of the argument. And only then can you have a rational discussion of the strengths and weaknesses of the argument.
All right, so take into consideration the feedback that I provided. I can summarize the feedback that I left this morning as follows. Number one, make sure that your thesis statement and each of your topic sentences are, in fact, claims. That is, they are debatable, they are arguable, and this is going to be what we need to try to achieve when we write out the skeleton outline. If you can achieve this, then you're going to have a strong structure to your argumentative essay. The second point, try to avoid, as I mentioned before, the modal can. Now, I'm not saying that you have to avoid all modals, but there's something about using can that shows that you're actually lessening the argument because you're showing probability. And we want to be more assertive. We want to make assertions that are true and say, okay, this is a true statement, and here's my evidence to support it. I've also thought about the counter, and there's evidence to support that. But at the end of the day, I still have, and you present your rebuttal and you say, this is still the way I feel about this argument, and this is why the counter is weak, and so on. But you're avoiding, for the most part, modals that show uncertainty, like can. And can is one of those modals that we tend to overuse for most academic purposes. And that's the reasoning, because it shows probability, uncertainty. And we don't want to show uncertainty, we want to show certainty. Point number 3, make sure that each topic sentence does 2 things. Number 1, it explicitly states the subject that's coming directly from one of the 3 points that is listed in your thesis statement. Okay, so again, the topic or the subject of the topic sentence, the subject of the sentence is going to come directly. It's going to be the same words that you use in your thesis statement. And this is the harder part. And the topic sentence should include clauses and phrases that present a claim that is more specific, that it presents an idea that's not the same idea exactly the way it's stated in the thesis statement. Of course, it's going to be the same words, but you have to go more and give us more or new information about that idea that's more specific, that only relates to the body paragraph. All right, so this is the challenging part. It's not so much the first point that I mentioned, right? The topic is usually straightforward. You're just using the same words pretty much that you included in your point, in your 3 points that you listed in your thesis statement. But the second point is the hard part. How do you make it more specific, right? How do you make it more specific? So now this can happen a lot of different ways. As writing is a process, sometimes it's going to be clear to us at the beginning when we write our skeleton outline how specific we need to be. But I also realize that sometimes that being too general is the starting point, and when you finish writing your body paragraph, sometimes it's easier to go back to the topic sentence and modify it in order to make that idea more specific. So you need to try to do both things. In the skeleton outline, as you've already done, present an idea, right, that you think is going to be representative for that essay, or for the body paragraph, sorry. But then when you finish writing the body paragraph, go back to the topic sentence and just make sure, first of all, that it's still aligned with the evidence that you presented. And number 2, that it's specific enough to involve a single paragraph. All right, and the last point, the verb to be. Be careful with the verb to be, because again, we're thinking about claims. And although claims can include the verb to be, in our case, we want to avoid these types. We want to present other verbs that are dynamic, that represent more of an idea that's debatable. Many times when we use the verb to be, the idea is almost like a fact, and it's usually not a debatable idea. And again, the easiest way to think of your topic sentences as whether or not they are good claims is simply think of the counterclaim and see if there's a logical counterclaim that is that relates to your topic sentence. Okay, so are there any questions based on this idea of what a claim is, topic sentences, and basically anything that we've talked about this morning so far? Are there any questions?
I don't think so, teacher.
No, teacher, thank you.
I'm also looking in the chat. If you want to unmute your mic and share a question, go right ahead. Or if you want to post something in the chat, if you have any questions. Okay, I can't hear you. All right, so let me check here. Okay, try now, guys.
Hello.
Hello.
Okay, I can hear you. All right, thanks. All right,
Okay.
go ahead.
No, well, I don't have any questions. At
Oh.
least not me.
So I know, you know, this is part of the process, guys. So keep going back to those topic sentences. Begin writing your your paragraphs. I'm going to create a space starting tomorrow in the virtual classroom where you can upload each of your 3 body paragraphs. So this is going to help me if you guys can upload your paragraphs as you're writing, whatever form they're in, and I can give you feedback during the writing process. You can be guaranteed that your grade is going to be better for your first draft and your final draft when you finally make it. If I see your first draft until Saturday, which is fine, right? I mean, if that's how you want to work, that's fine. But it's not, as far as the learning process goes, I think we both can get more out of it if I can give you feedback throughout the process. And I know that feels uncomfortable because you're being exposed more as far as what you're writing, how, your development and all of that. I understand that, but it does help, and it does, I think, give you a different perspective when you receive feedback from your first paragraph and you take that into consideration for your second paragraph. We did this for Unit 1, but because this is a more demanding essay, especially for these body paragraphs, they're going to include not only one claim, they could also include a counterclaim and possibly even a rebuttal in the same paragraph.
Teacher, I have doubts about that.
Yes.
I'm still having problems to understand, for example, how can I write the body paragraphs using the meal plan? How is it going to be?
All right. So I'm going to, if you guys are looking at the chat, I'm going to try to explain and also upload a few things here to complement what I'm talking about. So before we talk about the meal plan, let me go back again and review how we can think about organizing our claims or our arguments throughout our overall argument.
Yes.
All right. So here, I'm going to give you an example, and I'm going to type here in the chat, first paragraph, and I'm going to use the initials I for initial, C for counter, and R for rebuttal. Okay, so I for initial argument, C for counter argument, and R for rebuttal. So in your first paragraph, this is an example of how you can include your claims, your arguments, your initial claims for the first paragraph. All right, and I'm going to type it like this. I'm going to type and I'll use lowercase. Okay, I. All right. So in this first paragraph, I used an example I. That is, I've got 3 pieces of evidence, 3 citations, and maybe they come from the same article, maybe they come from different articles, but I've got 3 paraphrased ideas that are coming from an outside source that support the initial claim of my first paragraph. Okay, so I'm only talking about evidence, guys. I'm only talking about, if we're thinking about the meal plan, I'm not talking about the analysis sentences, and I'm not talking about the linking sentences. I'm only referring to the evidence, okay? Because the evidence are also claims, but they're claims from somebody else that support one of our 3 arguments. In this case, I've got 3 pieces of evidence coming from an outside source that supports the initial claim, and I have 3 of them, and that's what I mean by I. Okay, so the first paragraph, I might have evidence that's organized in this fashion. Now, my second paragraph, I might have something like this. I see. Now, what does this mean? So, my second paragraph is going to now address the second point that I've listed in my thesis statement, right? So the I in the second paragraph is not the same I as the first. What's the difference? Well, we've got 2 different points completely, right? We've got 2 different points. All of you have 3 different points that you're considering in your thesis statement in your argumentative essay. So in the second paragraph, I have an I that's an evidence that supports the initial claim, but of my second point, because it's the second paragraph. And then I've also included a counter claim or a counter argument that is counter to the first point here of my initial claim in my second paragraph. Both the I and the C are evidence. We're still talking about citations. We're not talking about analysis sentences of the meal plan. We're not talking about linking sentences of the meal plan. We're only talking about evidence sentences. Okay? So we have I and a C. This is a possibility. And what I'm sharing with you here is an option. I'm not saying that everyone should do exactly what I'm doing here. Okay, but this is an option. Okay, now the third paragraph is obviously going to discuss the third point. And let's say I could have something like this. I, C, R. I is our initial claim for our third point. C is our counter claim of our third point. And R is our rebuttal. Now, remember that the counterclaim is designed to explain what's weak about the initial argument. And the rebuttal or the reply is designed to state what's weak about the counter argument. Now, in this example, I want to give you another option here, another way of looking at these counters and the rebuttal based on this example. So let's go back to the second paragraph. We've got initial claim and we have a counterclaim. This counterclaim, of course, needs to express what's weak about the initial claim of the second paragraph, but it can also relate either directly or indirectly to some claim that was mentioned in the first paragraph. It's possible. You're best to try to counter directly what you mentioned in the second paragraph, but it could also directly or indirectly relate to what you've already mentioned. Now, this first counter in the second paragraph should not have anything to do really about the initial claim in the third paragraph because you haven't presented the initial claim yet. So you don't want the counterclaims to talk about something that you haven't, to counter something that you haven't presented. But it can be something that you presented prior, whether it's within the same paragraph or it comes from a paragraph before. But all of these examples, I've got three I's in the first paragraph, IC in the second, and ICR in the third. All of these are claims, they're arguments, they're statements that relate to the evidence part of the meal plan. Okay, so this is the distinction I want to be really clear on. All of these evidence, when I ask you, well, do you have a counterclaim for this? Do you have, what's your initial claim here? What's your rebuttal here? This is all about evidence because your job as the researcher, as the writer, is to find evidence, right? All of the articles that you're coming up with and your research matrix that you completed, that's all about the evidence. It's just helping you organize your ideas, bringing in outside sources so that you can organize these in a way that presents a strong argument. That's what's challenging about an argumentative essays. How do you form an argument? How do you present these initials and the counterclaims and the rebuttals in a way that is logical and that you're building a strong argument? Because if you mix these up and you don't pay close attention to the way in which you're organizing these, then you're going to have a weak argument. And they're not going to be convinced. You're not going to convince them, right? Because let's say maybe you didn't present any counterclaims. Maybe you didn't present a rebuttal to finalize and drive home your final argument, right? If you end with a counterclaim, there's no resolution. It's like, well, okay, so luego okay, right? You're just presenting the other option, but what about it? Is that it? Okay, there's two sides of the issue here. No, you need that rebuttal at some point. Now, do you need a rebuttal in every paragraph? No, you don't. Okay, there are many options here. If you, in your first paragraph, I'll type it up here, you could have something like this. You could have I see. Second paragraph, you could have something like I see. Third paragraph, I see an R. Okay, that's fine. You might have an ICR in the second paragraph and an ICR in the third, right? But you're probably not going to have something like this. Like you'll have first paragraph. You're not going to have I and then an R, right? That doesn't even make sense. That's not logical. If you have a first paragraph like this, I see, in the second paragraph, CR. First paragraph, I see, in the second paragraph, CR. That is not logical. And what's wrong with that? Well, we're missing an initial claim for the second point. So here's one thing you're going to need is you're going to need initial claim for each of your 3 points. All right. So that's for sure. Now the question is how you're going to present the counters and the rebuttals throughout. So as long as you have a logical organization and you're presenting at some point some counter and a rebuttal at some point throughout your 3 body paragraphs, and it's logical in the way that you're presenting them, then you have, that's fine. You have different options on how you can present. But remember, all of this has to do with evidence. Okay. Now the meal plan, it's the same thing that you've always done when writing an academic essay following the meal plan. You're going to start with the topic sentence, the main idea from the acronym MEAL. M stands for main idea. That's our topic sentence. We've talked at length what we mean by topic sentences, okay, from your skeleton outline, right? That is your main idea, okay? So no problems there. Well, the evidence is exactly what we've been talking about. How are you presenting your evidence, your claims, your initial claim, the counterclaim, and the rebuttal throughout your essay? That's all evidence, all right? So no issues there. So you've got your main idea and you've got your evidence. Now the analysis sentences are exactly the same idea as what you've always done. What's the purpose of the analysis sentence? It's to link the evidence to the main idea. Because all you're doing with evidence is you're just giving examples and details. You presented an idea, a general idea for the paragraph. The evidence is statistics, they might include statistics, examples, details. But your job as the writer is to include analysis sentences or where you comment on the evidence. You have to speak about the evidence. You have to connect for the reader. How does this relate? How does the evidence relate back to the topic sentence? How does it relate back to the thesis? How does the evidence relate to each other? Right? That's all the analysis sentence. That's where the critical thinking of writing happens, because what we don't want, guys, is for you guys just to write out and list out all citations. Okay, maybe you've seen examples of writing where it's just citation, 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 citation. Next paragraph. There might be a topic sentence, and then citation, 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 citation. Right? What's wrong with that? Well, there's no discussion. There's no commenting. There's no critical thinking going on that helps the reader relate what the evidence, what it has to do with the topic sentence, or even back to the thesis. Okay, so the meal plan is designed to help you think about the role each sentence plays, both in terms of an argument, in this case for an argumentative essay, but also what is the function of the sentence in the paragraph in terms of what its role is. Is it presenting evidence, or is it commenting and linking the evidence to the topic sentence? Finally, the last sentence is going to be either a linking sentence or a summarizing sentence of the paragraph. Remember that a body paragraph is a mini essay. It has a beginning, a middle, and an end. So you don't want to just drop off your paragraphs. You don't want to stop suddenly at the end of a paragraph where you comment on something and you don't tie it into either something that's coming up next, or you don't summarize it back into maybe even relating it back to the thesis statement, just kind of a summarizing sentence to kind of really put a bow on it, as they say, right? To finish and complete the idea, because again, a paragraph is a mini essay. If you can remember the meal plan and you can present your ideas in a logical form, you're going to have a very strong academic essay, right? And all of these tips and strategies that I'm providing you is not just something that I want specifically for this class. This is everything that we're working on here applies to any type of academic essay that anyone else asks you to write. And as you are thinking about the meal plan, it just helps us conceptualize the different functions or roles that sentence play. They're not all the same. They don't all have the same function, or they shouldn't anyway, right? And there's other acronyms. I think PEE is another acronym. If you don't like the acronym MEAL, P stands for point, or the main point of the paragraph. The first E stands for evidence, and the second E stands, the second P stands for, what is the second P now? I don't use that acronym that much. What is it? I think it's, I forget now. Oh, explain. That's it. Explain. So the first E stands for evidence. The second E stands for explain. So you explain. What are you explaining? You're explaining the evidence in terms of the main idea, right? So if that helps you conceptualize more, if you're thinking in terms of the PEE versus meal, MEAL, fine. The only thing that the meal plan has is that last sentence that links or summarizes. And for me personally, I think that makes it that much better, having that final sentence at the end of the paragraph to, again, kind of finalize the paragraph. So that was kind of a long answer, but I think that's an important question, making sure that we're clear on the differences between the different arguments in terms of evidence for this essay and what we mean by the meal plan, thinking in terms of the main idea, evidence, analyze, and link. Okay, so Ali, I don't know if this helps, or anyone else, if you want me to go over something again, but this is a very important question that I want to make sure you guys are clear on about making this distinction. Does that help?
Yeah, teacher, I will try to work on that, and I'll let you know if I'm still having problems.
Yeah, and sometimes it makes it easier, I think, if you have an example of a body paragraph and we can speak specifically about, these things, about evidence and your arguments and the meal plan, but specifically in terms of what you have. That's why tomorrow I'm going to ask that you guys start uploading your paragraphs so we can have these conversations, preferably before Saturday, the due date for your first draft. Okay. Any other questions, guys?
Not
No,
for the
teacher, thank you.
All right, so make sure that you're able to find my feedback. If anyone has problems finding the feedback in the virtual classroom under the assignments, please let me know. I think in most cases I did leave comments. There might have been a few where I didn't, but make sure that you can find those the feedback, of course, and continue working in your shared Word online document. And I think I mentioned this before, your first draft on Saturday, I'm going to ask that you upload an actual file, the file that you're using. So just download the online file onto your computer and then maybe upload the Word document in the virtual classroom under the assignment. All right, guys, if there are no more questions, I think we'll stop there. There's a lot of stuff we talked about here today, but I want you to start writing if you haven't already. And I'm going to, starting tomorrow, I'm going to open up the class a little bit more to questions and reviewing your progress. And because now it's basically just presenting your ideas and getting your ideas down on paper. And when you're writing your first draft, don't worry about grammatical mistakes. Don't worry about punctuation. Don't worry about articles and commas and all of that. Just try to get your ideas out, thinking in terms of your argument, and try to use the research matrix as your guide. As you have presented those ideas, try to move those ideas from the matrix over to your Word Online document and then begin developing your paragraph. Start with one of the 3 body paragraphs. Start with the one that's the easiest. You don't have to start with the first one. You can start with the one that's the easiest and try to get one completed as soon as possible. So again, I can provide you some feedback, especially in terms of the arguments and how you're presenting, so that you know that you're on the right track. All right, guys, we'll stop there for today. Continue to send me messages in Microsoft Chat if you have questions, or we need to discuss something, or you want me to review something, if it's something outside of class. Otherwise, bring your questions into these online sessions so that we can take advantage of the time that we have together each day from 8 o'clock to 9 o'clock. And a final reminder, if you haven't already, for attendance purposes, make sure that you've signed in to the virtual classroom. Remember, that's a requirement every day, Monday through Friday, from 8 to 9 o'clock in the morning for this class. All right, my friends, I think we'll stop there and enjoy the rest of your day. And we'll see everybody tomorrow at 8 o'clock.
Bye, teacher.
Bye, teacher. Thank you.
Okay, teacher, thank you. Bye.
Bye, guys.